Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order the work session for the City Council for the City of Wildwood for Monday, June the 8th, 2020. Ms. Eldridge, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Bolin.
Here.
Councilmember Stevens.
Here.
Councilmember McCune.
Here.
Councilmember Boat.
Present.
Councilmember Bertolino.
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Here.
Councilmember Remy. Councilmember Edens.
Here.
Councilmember Bros.
Here.
Councilmember Garitano.
Here.
Councilmember Werther.
Present.
Councilmember Jordan.
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon.
Here.
Councilmember Farmer. Councilmember Dillard.
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni.
Here.
Councilmember Gagnani.
Okay, thank you. And before we get into our agenda this evening, I want to welcome the intern who's been shadowing me, Trey Trapani, who's a sophomore at Lafayette High School and is from Ward 7. And I think Trey wanted to say a few words to the council this evening. Trey, would you like to say something?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Bolin. I won't impede on too much of your time today. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank all of you for allowing me to witness the way our city government works. I'd like to thank Mayor Bolin for helping me get started in this. I think it's very important that the city has started to do this because I think it's good for kids my age to see how the civic system works. Thomas Jefferson said that it is while we are in our youth that the habit of industry is formed. If not then, it is never afterwards. The fortune of our lives, therefore, depends on employing well the short period of our youth. And I would like to thank all of you for allowing me an opportunity to form that habit of industry.
Thank you, Trey, and we're glad to have you. Moving next to information, we have 5 items before we go to the action items. Is there anything under information that any member of the council would like to discuss or about which you may have questions? Councilmember Stevens.
For Mr. Vunich, on the rural internet access, what's the update on the polls for the Brook Hollow subdivision?
Councilmember Stevens, I believe we're kind of heading in a little bit different direction. As is noted in the report as well, Bays ET has finally been able to complete an agreement with AT&T Wireless to use their facilities. AT&T's wireless's facilities are everywhere in the city already. And what we've heard initially from the first of the residents to sign up for this service is that it's reliable, the signal's strong, and it seems to be working well. And so Bays ET is getting the word out, so to speak, to subdivisions like Brook Hollow. And if that's not successful, then I think we should go back to the plan we started with, and that's installing some additional poles in the vicinity of Brook Hollow. But this looks like a real positive. It's not the final solution, but a positive. Thank you.
Okay. And so we never purchased the poles or installed the poles, or nobody's ever received any upgraded internet from the emergency resolution as of this point?
As of this point, we've not had success finding locations. For example, the Brook Hollow subdivision, we met with one of the trustees and the property owner in the adjoining residential subdivision. They weren't too enthused about having another pole, gave us some suggestions in the vicinity of their subdivision. But then again, as I mentioned, Bays ET was finally able to complete the agreement with AT&T Wireless. So we've kind of shifted gears a little on that so as to avoid expense to the city, but also give what I think may be a better service to our residents.
Okay, and is that going to, like, this expanded AT&T LTE service? Do you think that that'll affect the longer term fiber to home service? Like, do you think, are people just going to be happy with the smaller upgrade, or are we still moving full speed ahead with the fiber services that were in the RFP?
Councilmember Stevens, I think some will be happy with this upgrade or this kind of mid-range upgrade. But at the end of the day, it's still about 15 megabits download speed and 2 megabits upload. And the internet's just not, you can't contain the internet in that speed range, and fiber to the home, as our consultants have mentioned, is future-proof. So we're proceeding forward. We received questions that the consultants will be sending to the 5 respondents to better kind of categorize their information and make it, as they said, apples to apples and oranges to oranges. Those questions were forwarded to the Rural Internet Access Committee today. I gave them till Thursday to respond, and then we'll get them to the 5 respondents thereafter. And at this stage, we're under no obligation, but I sure think we should proceed forward and play this hand that we've been dealt.
Okay. And then on a different topic, on the erosion control, the report from Dr. Hammer, I read it said that it's a human-made breach. Did somebody dig out the bank to get rock out of Cox Creek? Is that what happened there?
I think Councilmember Edens and I believe that the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District, when they engaged a contractor to replace a main trunk line for sanitary sewer, had to access the creek system in several locations and didn't do a very good job of restoring it, which has now led to a problem for the Highlands at Wild Horse. And I'll defer to Ms. Edens if she'd like to respond as well.
Okay, and that, well, just one other real quick, Joe, while I got you.
Yes, sir.
In the report, it says, one of the big challenges is getting, getting all parties together, since it's privately owned properties that abut. Is there any plans for the for the erosion task force to, establishing a list of contacts for all the adjacent properties to Cox Creek, just to start the process of getting access?
Yes, there is. The Watershed Erosion Task Force early on broke itself into 4 subcommittees, and one is the Public Education Subcommittee, and their charge is to kind of get people that live along the creek to understand the dynamics, also do's and don'ts, but also get them on board in terms of solutions, and certainly if those solutions involve access.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Just a couple of follow-up points I would mention relative to your questions, Councilmember Stevens, about the rural internet. We do have one pole location that we can still use if we need to do it. The second thing is, as Joe said, the reception at this point to the LTE program that BayZT has provided recently has been good. And I think ultimately the question is going to come down relative to increasing the speeds to the rural areas, whether either those residents or all the residents of our city want to pay what, by all accounts, I believe is going to be several $1 million to do that, or whether they will be essentially satisfied with the LTE option or other upgrades as we move forward in terms of wireless. And we're just going to have to see, I don't know the answer to that. We're just going to have to cross those bridges as we get there. So I would just add that. Councilmember Dillard.
Yes, thank you. I think this is a question for Mr. Vunich, if not maybe Mr. Hansen, regarding 3A1, the Wildwood Celebration Commission and the 2020 Celebrate Wildwood event, the new partner Wildwood Business Association. I know what the WBA is, and I guess my question is, what as a legal entity is the WBA? Because from all I can find, it was dissolved as a legal entity in December of 2019. So do you have anything to add about that?
Mr. Dillard, I didn't realize that, and certainly will verify their standing, at least with the Secretary of State's office here in the state of Missouri. In terms of their partnership, as you know, they were thinking about substituting an event that they would partner with the city for the Wildwood Barbecue Bash.
Right.
It's been pretty clear, as you would note today, the Muni Opera canceled its season, I think the first time in their history. And so the pandemic is still kind of throwing everybody some curves and some unknowns. And so the thought was, instead of having two separate events, the WBA's barbecue, beer, and bands, or whatever the sequence was with the Bs, and ours, we thought this year and this year alone, we kind of combined them, see if we could do a day or a day and a half event, and then kind of regroup in 2021 and help each other out, but to do separate events.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, I'm not speaking against the idea. I think it could probably be a good idea. I'm just, and I'm glad you brought up the barbecue event, because I wish we had had that information about the WBA when we had that debate, because I'm just a little leery about forming, partnerships or extending, what amounts to a short-term loan to an organization that doesn't actually legally exist. Any one of us could start a bank account and call it, promote Wildwood business or something like that, and have as much standing as they do, legally speaking.
And I believe City Attorney Young and I will put that on the top of our list tomorrow to investigate and get you some answers. So
Yeah, I
thank
appreciate
you.
that.
I think our city administrator may have some information. Mr. Hansen?
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, council members. Yes, Councilmember Dillard, you are correct. We won't enter into any formal agreement with the Wildwood Business Association until they've gotten a registration with the Secretary of State's office cleaned up.
Councilmember Jordan?
I have a question and a comment on a little bit different piece. The question is with respect to the LTE service. Has there been any review as to how many additional residents might be able to get service, if any, that was not able to get it before? I mean, I'm just wondering with the LTE, it's effectively, it's not increasing speeds to residents. It is potentially more reliable, as been stated, but since it requires that cellular reception, I'm wondering, residents who could not get service at all, if they could have gotten service through LTE, presumably they would have tried that by now. I guess I'm a little confused as to how that adds service on incrementally. Are there a fair number of residents that could not get service in any way that suddenly, because of this LTE, will be able to, Mr. Bundes?
I'll
So
defer
if I-
to the
if I
mayor
could,
if he would
if I
like to
could,
answer.
Joe,
Please.
I believe this was in an email. My recollection is an email that I provided to the council, but according to Bays ET, the LTE service that they've been able to, the service that they've been able to obtain by utilizing AT&T's LTE service will provide access to approximately 91% of those in our rural areas that don't currently have it. So that's the best answer we have at the moment.
I thought it was 91% of all of Wildwood.
No, 91% of those residents who don't currently have service.
Okay. The comment that I have is with respect to something actually you said a few minutes ago about referring to the fiber RFP and results. And you mentioned that maybe residents in wards 1 and 6 might like the LTE better than having to pay for the fiber deployment. May not have been your exact words, but I would encourage the council to not go to that just immediate assumption that the residents in Ward 6 and Ward 1 should have to pay for their internet service. The city certainly has, absent the COVID situation that's gone on right now, has a long history of spending millions in other wards, be it for a park, be it for a pedestrian walkover, be it for sidewalk and roundabout installations. And Ward 6 and Ward 1 really traditionally don't have those kind of expenditures. And this is not just the addition of a park or a pedestrian walkway, which are niceties, but it's really a necessity. It's essentially a utility, and frankly, one that the National Housing Association has surveyed and found to be of more interest to residents, even than water, believe it or not. So it's significant, and I think that we shouldn't just out the gate start with the assumption that Ward 6 and Ward 1 residents should have to pay for that utility. And instead, I would encourage that there be a way to certainly one should strive for an opportunity for the city to treat that ward as with others in terms of, you know, the funds that the city brings in. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Edens.
It's okay. I was just going to briefly explain with the attachment that it was MSD that put an easement into that curve. And when I had been out there with MSD before, they told me they needed to research the issue because, quote, they didn't know why they did it and they didn't know why they did it in that location. So there were several red flags, but the city is working with the HOA and the city is working with MSD on this issue. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Bartoni.
Thank you. And this is, I mean, really goes back to what Councilmember Dillard had talked about with the WBA. Maybe their registration may have expired with Secretary of State. I know just like a lot of the businesses I work with on my normal day job are showing at the Secretary of State's office that their license has expired when actually they've sent in the paperwork. It's just because of the COVID, Jeff City is way behind on catching up on this paperwork. So hopefully that's what we find out with the WBA also.
Thank you. All right, anything further from any member of the council under informational items before we go to action items? Okay, seeing none, going to action items, we have two. The first is a recommendation from our Board of Public Safety relative to security services. Rick Brown, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Mayor. I believe Joe Vunich is probably prepared to talk to this one, if that's okay.
That's fine, Joe. Sorry.
Quite all right, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Brown and I partner on a lot of things, so I'm sure he could do a better job than I, but I did prepare the memo for this particular item. So please ask both of us any questions, as well as Mr. Bertolino, who is the liaison on this particular board from City Council. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, I think it's very important to start this presentation by saying the request from the Board of Public Safety is just to authorize the bidding process to proceed for the video camera security system for City Hall and the parking garage. I state that because obviously we are in an uncertain time relative to the pandemic. We are waiting for figures relative to sales tax for May of 2020. And it's certainly that the Board of Public Safety, the Department of Planning, the Department of Public Works, and the Department of Administration are not aware of the concerns that City Council holds. However, this has been a project now that has been in discussion with the Board of Public Safety or City Council since the beginning of 2019. The need has not lessened. In fact, in recent times, I think the need has become much more clear in terms of providing security and safety here at City Hall and within the areas of our parking garage scheduled for the camera's deployment. The Board of Public Safety was supportive of proceeding forward into the bidding process, acknowledging that if a bid is potentially selected for recommendation by the Board of Public Safety, it will be potentially in the latter part of fall or early winter of this year and may not be executed until 2021. But knowing what we know about our processes, the technical nature of the systems, and wanting hands-on demonstrations, we thought it'd be better to start early than later and be ready, if City Council concurs, to deploy as soon as possible in 2021. So the recommendation before you tonight is to authorize the Department of Administration, the Department of Public Works, and the Department of Planning to proceed forward with creating the necessary advertisements in the appropriate papers and et cetera to advertise this particular item and receive bids and then start the process of review thereafter. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, as I mentioned, all three of us, Mr. Anselm, Mr. Brown, and I, along with Mr. Bertolino, can speak to this matter if you'd like, and thank you for your attention. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. And before we get to Katie, I just have a question, Joe, for background information for the benefit of the council. This item was previously approved by the council sometime back, but because of issues with certain equipment coming from China, it sort of went off the track. And so that's why it is back now. Is that correct?
That's exactly it. The cameras that were part of the bid that was supported by City Council were from Huawei, a China manufacturing company, a telecommunications company. And so we had to remove those. And at that stage, we thought best to start the process over.
Okay, so given that and given the need for these items, what would be the shortest period of time that the acceptance of bids, that time period, what is the shortest, and that may be for the city attorney or you, either one, what's the shortest time period we could do given that we're now sometime past where we were previously when this was approved?
Well, I will defer to Mr. Young, our city attorney, if he'd like to answer.
City Attorney Young?
I'm sorry, could you, wasn't
So
following.
what's the shortest time period on a bid process of this nature that the open bids can be received?
There's no legal limitation on the time period. It just comes down to the reasonableness of the ability of the contractors to respond.
And what do you think the reasonable here? The shortest time? 10 days?
I would say at a minimum 2 weeks.
Okay, 2 weeks. All right, thank you. Councilor Dodwell?
Continue forward, but I would, based on the previous conversation, I would also request that we give it a little bit longer than 2 weeks, just to make sure that we get a full bid and don't get bids back that don't have the details on them that we need. And that we also include the police department and public safety committee in some fashion to review those bids. I think that's what we were planning on previously. Is that correct, Joe?
Yes, ma'am. Very much so.
So I'll make a motion that we move this along timely, but let's move it out 3 weeks, and that'll give everybody who might respond some ability to quickly gather their source information on where they're going to be sourcing their equipment from.
Thank you. So we have a motion to proceed with a 3-week period for responses to the request, and that's seconded by Councilmember Farmer. So we have a motion on the floor. Councilmember McCune?
Yes, I think that the motion is reasonable. My question, I guess, would relate to the direct motion. And Joe and Rick, you can kind of comment. Have we seen an increase in activity where we need to push this quicker because of issues we've had and we need cameras, or have we seen any other activity? I guess I'm more specific with the garage. So I just want to make sure that we're timely and we're avoiding potential crime or sprees. Have we had anything that's been noted lately?
The garage has always been an issue. We have a lot of activity in there, and most of it we catch after the fact. Either beer cans, beer bottles, and the trash cans are left on the garage floor. We also know that it's become somewhat of a lover's lane at times. And we do park a lot of the police vehicles over there, as well as we store a lot of our equipment. So the feeling is that's a key part, the lower level. But I was hoping that I could even maybe get a little bit more time for the bidders to respond. And there's two primary reasons for that. Although come next Monday, County Executive Page is going to open up, I think, most of the economy. But I still think there's a lingering component of COVID-19. And we also have the 4th of July holiday in there, and it falls on a Friday this year, which I know a lot of people will probably be taking the week before off. So I was hoping that we could maybe set the date out somewhere in mid-July, if not the end of July, which is contrary to the motion Ms. Dodwell made. But I just think we have a unique set of circumstances right now.
Okay, so since I have the floor, if it's okay with the original motion, Ms. Dodwell, if we can amend your original motion, and Mayor, you can help me through this, just to accommodate Joe and what his needs are. If we don't have an immediate need at this point, I think that it's valid to extend it out for staff if you don't oppose.
So Councilor McCune, would you like mid-July or the end of July?
Joe, I will ask you what your preference is.
Mid-July would be fine.
Okay, mid-July.
Okay, so why don't we do it this way? Let's start with, maybe we don't need a formal motion here. Councilmember Dodwell, do you or Councilmember Farmer have any objection to moving it to the open period for bids to mid-July?
None whatsoever.
Okay, does any member of the council have any objection to the main motion being revised editorially to reflect a response as to, being mid-July, July 15? Is there any objection from any member of the council? Okay, Councilmember Jordan, are you objecting or do you want to be on the list to speak? I have you on the list to speak.
I have a question, basically.
Okay, are you objecting to July 15th? I need to know that.
July 15th is better than doing it immediately. So in that sense, I'm not objecting. My question, I don't know how to answer your question. I'm curious whether this can be delayed longer and that if somehow that would not help with the budget issues that we see coming as a result of COVID.
Okay, hold that just 1 second.
So I don't know if that's an objection or not.
Hold that just a moment. So I'm gonna assume that it sounds to me like you're okay with the motion being amended to July 15 as a response date to the request for proposals. And then we have Councilmember Stevens before you, and once he speaks, then we'll come back to you if you want to speak to that issue, Councilmember Jordan. Okay. Councilmember Stevens, you're next.
Yeah, I guess I would object to putting any time frame on it at all and just take your time on it. The last time that we did these bids, from what I read, it almost looked like it was like a no bid contract by the time it got done, because there was a 2018 bid from Butler Durrell versus like a 2019 bid from other companies. And this, like, they were given approval at a Board of Public Safety meeting, one meeting, and then the scope of work changed the next meeting. And so, I don't know, it was a really weird situation. So I would just say, take your time and make sure that the bids are done properly this time. And then,
okay,
this began back in like
Councilmember Stevens,
2018.
Councilmember
right?
Stevens, just bear with me for a moment. So because you've objected, we're going to go back and do it formally, because once a motion is made and seconded, it's the prerogative of the entire council. And so if any member of the council objects, then that means we need to do it more formally. So we're going to go through that process. Before we do that, I will say, and Joe Bennett, you or Rick Brown or the city administrator may want to respond, but I'm not aware of anyone ever claiming that the bidding process up to this point was done, quote unquote, improperly. But we'll hold that. We got to handle Councilor McCune's first. If they want to respond to that allegation, we can get there, but I'm not aware of anyone ever saying that. Councilor McCune, would you like to make a motion to amend the main motion to expand the time for response to the request for proposals to mid-July?
Yes, sir. On the recommendation of staff.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Just the based on what the staff is requesting. Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, perfect. So June, the motion is made to amend the time period for response to July 15, and that is seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. So debate at this point is only on the changing of the date. Is there any discussion as to changing the date from 2 weeks, I believe it was 2 weeks, is that correct? Yeah, 2 weeks to July 15, 2020. Any discussion? All right, seeing no discussion, I'm sorry, Councilmember Stevens.
And just to, so I'm clear, on the proposal or on the packet here, it says on, page 4 that the purchase of the equipment is going to be funded with funds that currently exist in the reserve fund. So are we doing, this is planning on
Councilor
spending
Stevens,
reserve
we're going to come
funds for
back to you
this?
on, Councilor Stevens, we're going to come back to you on that. The debate at the moment is only on the time, not on the source of funds or anything else, but depending on what happens.
I know, but I don't want to vote on a time frame if it's reserve fund spending, if we don't have numbers on, we were told that we had to wait on budget discussions because we needed the numbers to come in, and now we're putting dates on reserve fund spending to hurry things along. I just, I'm not comfortable with that.
Okay, so your question then is what is the source of the funds for this? Is that your specific question?
Yeah, are we is this a plan to spend reserve funds?
Okay, City Administrator Hansen,
as I read it.
answer that.
Yes, I'd be happy to. The funding source for the security cameras would be Proposition P funds, and essentially any funds that aren't spent in a previous calendar year get rolled over to the following year. So while this item wasn't specifically, and Joe can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't have the information right in front of me. While this item wasn't specifically budgeted for 2020, there are sufficient funds available for that.
In the reserves, right?
Yes, sir. I mean, yes, there's a distinction between Proposition P funds, general funds as well. So the funding is available.
And Mr. Stevens, with the mayor's permission.
Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you, sir. Sorry I interrupted you. Prop P funds do have their own reserve, but if the timing works out, we may not need to use the reserve, particularly if we have this staged for 2021, the start of 2021.
Okay, thank you. So is there any further discussion on the changing of the time period to July 15? Seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll. This is only on the amendment of changing the time, and regardless of whether it passes or fails, we'll come back to the main motion, which is to move forward as recommended by the Board of Public Safety. Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll. An affirmative vote is to change the date to July 15 for the response to the request for proposals.
Councilmember Stevens,
What are we changing the date from? What's the date currently?
From 2 weeks from today to July 15.
No.
Councilmember McCune,
Yes.
Councilmember Boat,
Yes.
Councilmember Bernardino,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Remy, Councilmember Remy, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Yes.
Councilmember Bros,
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano,
Yes.
Councilmember Worther.
Aye.
Was that a yes?
That was an aye.
Councilmember Jordan,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Dillard,
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Yes.
Councilmember Gargnani.
So Councilor Gragnani is not with us this evening, it appears.
Sorry.
That's all right. And Councilman Remy did vote yes for those of you who may not have heard him. We had an issue with his mute button. So the motion to amend passes. We're now back to the main motion as amended, which is to proceed with the response date of deadline of July 15. Any further discussion on the main motion?
Mr. Mayor, if I could add one more point.
Sure, Joe.
And my apologies for making this discussion longer. It is the intent, I think, of the Department of Administration plus the Departments of Public Works and Planning to try to have the bidders hold those prices for an extended period of time. We think with COVID-19 and the economy in its current state, that's a fair request to make. And again, with the intent to try to extend this process as long as we can, so as when January 2021 comes along, we'll be in a position to proceed forward. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further discussion, Councilmember Stevens.
So why wouldn't this just go in the 2021 budget then?
It is the hope of the department that when we have the bids have the response to the advertisement in hand, that we can program it just as we do with every other capital improvement or public safety improvement, as we do the budget process through the fall of this year in preparation for new fiscal year 2021. I guess what I'm saying is we're trying to plan ahead, and we're starting now instead of, let's say, September. Thank you.
Well, okay, I'm sorry, but well, if that's the case, then it's not going to come out of the reserve fund, or is it still going to come out of the reserve fund? I'm just confused on that.
Well, the hope is
and the funding.
Again, the department is hopeful that we'll engage a contract in December with payment deferred to 2021 or some time frame like that. And the hope is that if we pay the cost in 2021, it won't need to come out of the reserve from Prop P public safety funds. But again, as always, there'll be bid responses, public safety will review, city council will review, and ultimately you'll all be able to make the decision about timing, cost, and even if the purchase moves forward. Thank you.
All right, so seeing no further discussion, Councilmember Jordan.
My question earlier, and maybe because it's Prop P funds, it doesn't work, but I just, this is a fairly substantial amount of money, and as we look for cutting back things due to this COVID and the impact on our budget, is this in any way beneficial to that discussion, or because it's Prop P funds, it couldn't be used for anything else?
City Administrator Hansen, would you like to answer that question?
Yes, sir. And thank you, Councilmember Jordan. Yes, these funds are the appropriate use. Prop P would be an appropriate use for these funds, and I would not recommend it to be funded out of our general fund or any other budget line items. So again, this was in the public safety budget previously. Due to the delays, we just need to double check and make sure that we're in the right fiscal year to actually purchase the cameras if we get that far. But I mean, again, as the conversation has sort of pointed out, we have plenty of time on this project. And I believe if we can get it budgeted for fiscal year 2021, we'll be in good shape. If we need to push it sooner and we have funds available in light of COVID-19, we'll be able to do that as well if the council chooses to use reserve funds for that.
Councilmember Dodd. I'm sorry, Councilmember Jordan, did that answer your question?
I think it basically did. The other question I had is, have there been any incidents that create any urgency in spending these funds? I mean, you mentioned some beer bottles and things like that in the garage, but anything from like a risk factor?
So I would just say this was requested initially by our police, and the council has already approved this once. This is really only here because of the change brought about on a federal level, obtaining certain items from China. But City Administrator Hansen, you want to try to answer that, please?
I mean, I'm not aware of any specific incidents that have occurred that would necessitate the purchase sooner rather than later. Obviously, the protection and safety of our employees and the people who visit City Hall for work or for business, we want to make sure that that they have the opportunity to be safe in the environment. Any specific instances? No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Dodwell.
In light of the current activities that have been going on across the nation, in light of the fact that that parking lot is not extremely well lit. In light of the fact that we've been talking about this for up to 2 years now, I want to make sure that we move steadfastly and effectively with this. I do not want the city of Wildwood to be on the front of the news feeds in another 6 months because somebody's decided that, oh, here's a quiet spot that we can set a fire, we can do inappropriate activities. I think we've been very lucky up to this point, but I feel that our public safety is one of our #1 priorities here. And if we have the means by which we can see who might be doing untoward activities in the garage, around the garage, in front of City Hall, then I think we would be very remiss in nitpicking this particular one that in light of COVID, I understand that we have to watch our budgets, et cetera, but public safety, I think, cannot be kicked like a can down the road.
Councilor McCune.
Just to kind of second on Ms. Stadwell's comment, just so I think that we need to be clear, these are, or Joe can maybe verify this, these are just security cameras. They don't prevent crime. They're helping to solve this afterwards. So it's not a preventative measure. It's more of a protection later, which I think is greatly important, and that it does give a great service to Wildwood. And sometimes it does deter crime. So I'm a big advocate. I'm not saying anything else, but I just want everybody to understand what the purpose is and how important it is to help preserve our assets and what the city has done. So again, just understand what the cameras are doing. I don't think they're going to be under, somebody's going to be watching them live. It's more of a preventative. So again, I just ask all the council to support this. I think that it's needed and we should move forward.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the main, Councilor Stevens, I think you've already had your 2. You have something new to add?
Yes.
Okay.
One of the original goals for Prop P was body cameras. How is the police doing on body cameras?
So I'm gonna rule I'm gonna rule that's not germane to the subject. If you want to
We're talking about purchasing cameras for the police, right?
No, we're talking about cameras at City Hall, I believe.
Okay. And Prop P. Okay.
All right, thank you. Seeing no further discussion, this is Ms. Eldridge, would you please call the roll for passage of the motion, which is to proceed as recommended by the Board of Public Safety with a deadline of July 15 for response by contractors. Yes vote is to be supportive of that motion.
Councilmember McCann,
Yes.
Councilmember Boak,
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Remy,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Bros,
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano,
Yes.
Councilmember Worther,
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Dillard,
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the vote. Councilor Stevens, what was your vote?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, motion carries. Moving next under the Department of Public Works, we have a contractor proposal for removal, treatment, replacement of ash trees. You have the information from Rick Brown. Would anyone like to make a motion to get that on the floor? To move forward as requested, made by Councilmember Bertolino. Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilmember Grost. We have Rick with us this evening. If anyone has any questions, does anyone have any questions relative to this? Councilmember Stevens.
This item was on the May 6th memo to council that all the capital improvement projects that hadn't been started in 2020 were going to be frozen. what has changed from May 6th to now that they've decided to move forward instead?
Rick Brown?
Councilmember Stevens, I would say this is back on your agenda per the motion that was made at the April 13th meeting where it was postponed for 45 days. So it's back for decision tonight. There was discussion at the Admin Public Works Committee meeting that we held relative to the budget. I think some of the other council members may want to speak to the specifics with regard to the discussion that was held, but by and large, I think the committee was very favorable with moving forward with those items that they felt were essential. And I'd like to believe that this would be one of those items.
Thank you, Rick. Any further questions or comments relative to the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, would you please call the roll for passage of the motion, which is to proceed as recommended by our Department of Public Works?
Councilmember Bo,
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Remy,
Come back to me for 1 second.
let me just skip him, come back.
So just one moment. Councilor Remy, you want to go ahead, speak to that?
Sorry, I just wanted to double check because I remember at the Admin Public Works meeting, I don't believe actually we approved this moving forward. I think this was one of the items we agreed that would remain on hold. So I just wanted to double check from our meeting minutes. Or maybe Mr. Garitano could answer that. I remember that we put this on hold at the Admin Public Works. We went forward with all the other items.
Rick Brown?
Again, I think I was acting in response to the action of the council at the prior work session where the motion was made to postpone it for 45 days. And I took that meaning to bring it back to the work session with the council after that time.
Okay, so you weren't speaking, Rick Brown, you weren't speaking relative to Admin Public Works, you were speaking as to the prior action of the council, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So that was a miscommunication. Okay, so Ms. Eldridge, why don't you start, just for clarification, why don't you call the roll from the beginning again, please, so that everyone has the benefit of having that information before they vote.
Can I just make a point of order?
Please state your point of order, Councilmember Remy.
Just for clarification from the city administrator who was part of that meeting, I believe we put this on hold. That's why I'm confused right now. And that meeting happened after that council meeting.
And I second that.
Can you just clarify that?
I have a point of information. What I remember was that we discussed that we didn't need to discuss it because it was coming back up at the next council meeting. So we didn't even talk about it because we said it would be taken care of at council.
Chair O'Donnell.
Yeah, I thought this was going to be because if it was coming back to council, otherwise we'd have to check the minutes on that. That's why I thought we were going to go ahead and decide on this today.
So I would say regardless of what happened or didn't happen at Admin Public Works as a matter of procedure, it is before the council. If you disagree with it, just vote against it. We can research that though, because we do want to get those things right. Councilor McCune. So
can we restart the vote? Or can we start at the beginning and revote?
we are going to start the revote, but I'm trying to clear out. I have Councilman McCune, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, I was just going to comment on that, and I'm going to defer to you. How do we kind of stop this for a second? And just, I want clarity from the minutes. And I think that Councilmember Edens made a good point, Chair Garitano, and Councilmember Remy and I was there too. So I'm a little confused too, because we talked about a lot. I would hate to move forward with this without having a clear understanding. So how can we stop this or come back to it after regular session, or how can we do this? Just
okay, so I have an answer for that, but let me, Councilmember Bertolino.
Yeah, I think I was the maker of the motion. to proceed. And you're right, I think we did discuss it, and Joe, we did discuss it at Admin Public Works, and I'm sorry, I'm a little confused as well as to what that recommendation was. So I would withdraw my motion at this point, Mr. Mayor, if that's possible.
Well, what I was going to suggest, we could do it that way. I was going to suggest, just given from a practical standpoint, that it is not likely in the time we have this evening that we can reasonably go back and look and have everyone agree on what and provide copies, which we'd want to do to the council as to what the minutes of not only the last council meeting were, but the minutes of Admin Public Works. I was going to ask if someone would make a motion to postpone this until the next council meeting so that can be done. We have that by Councilmember Rooney, seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. Is there any objection to a motion to postpone to the next council meeting? Councilmember Stevens.
Well, if we didn't have budget talks at council because we wanted the standing committees to take up.
Councilmember Stevens, I'm asking if you object to the motion to postpone.
Yeah,
I
object, I guess, because I would rather see a referral back to Admin Public Works so we actually go through the process that we said we were going to go through on the budget.
Okay, fair enough. So we have an objection. So we'll do a roll call vote on the motion to postpone to the next council meeting.
I have a
Ms.
question.
Eldridge,
Can I
please call
make
it.
a motion to refer? Does that trump the motion to postpone?
It doesn't. A motion to postpone trumps a motion to refer.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Edens.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't we on a limited time frame with the treatment section of the proposal, that if we miss that window, if we delay it too long or refer back to committee, then we'll have to look at the whole proposal again because we've missed the treatment window. Is that correct, Mr. Brown?
So if I could, Councilmember Edens, there is, based on prior discussion of the council and given the insects that are in the weather, the sooner this is done, I believe that discussion was the answer is the better. We can ask Rick Brown if 2 weeks is something that is going to be fatal relative to that. If that is, then you would vote against the motion to postpone, and it's not a motion to refer back. It's only a motion to postpone to the next council meeting. Rick, is 2 weeks going to cause a problem relative to this?
I think time is of the essence, no doubt, with regard to the treatment of the trees. And I do have Andy Berg, who is with Davie Resource Group, with us, and he can speak more specifically with regard to that. But the window for treatment is definitely closing.
Okay, so Rick, we need to know a yes or no. Is 2 weeks doable or not? We got it.
I would say no relative to the treatment. We were really needing to move forward with a decision to bring back the legislation in 2 weeks with hopes of a double reading. So if I could bring it back for a vote on the legislation, we could still have forward progress.
So are you considering this this motion tonight, Rick, simply a motion to get legislation prepared for the next meeting?
That is correct, Mayor. This is only authorization to present the legislation to the council at the following meeting.
Okay. So then that means that the council would have the opportunity to vote up or down at the next council meeting that legislation.
That's correct.
Okay. So with Councilmember McCutcheon, I'm sorry, Councilmember Bartoni.
So thank you. And I don't remember exactly what we talked about either, but we talked about this at the Planning and Parks meeting the last time we met in City Hall. And I don't remember what we had talked about at that time also, but I mean, we postponed this 45 days ago because of budgetary unknowns, and those unknowns are still unknown. I mean, we pretty much don't know what we don't know. So, I mean, whether there's a window or not, I just don't see any urgency to do this.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember McCutcheon.
Yeah, I have a procedural question. We had a motion on the floor that we started voting on, then we stopped voting on it, and now we're on a different motion. So is that procedurally correct?
It is. The reason is because the council was being provided with new information, and so the motion was made to postpone, which trumps the main motion. And once that's decided, if it fails, we'll go back to the main motion. But if it doesn't, then this would be postponed for 2 weeks. But again, as Rick Brown mentioned, this motion, if it passes, is only to prepare legislation to be brought back to the council at its next meeting for first reading.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion to postpone? Seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll as to postponing this for 2 weeks.
Can I get clarification on who made the motion? It cut out.
I think the motion to postpone was made by Councilmember Remy, and it was seconded by,
Dodwell?
I believe Councilmember Dodwell. My recollection was me correct.
Okay. Councilmember Boat?
Vote.
Oh, let's see. Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell?
Yes.
Councilmember Remy?
Yes.
Councilmember Edens?
Yes, to prepare.
No, this is to
Councilmember-
postpone, Councilmember Edens.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, to delay them.
Councilmember Bros?
No.
Councilmember Garitano?
No.
Councilmember Werther?
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan?
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon?
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer?
No.
Councilmember Dillard?
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember McKeon?
Just clarify the motion. I got a little bit confused here.
It's a motion to postpone consideration of this until the next council meeting.
Yes, for the minute clarification.
So I'm sorry, you're done calling the roll, Councilmember, or I'm sorry, City Clerk Eldridge. So the motion to postpone carries. This will be on the agenda for the next council meeting. And looks like we've got
Of information, I know it's on the agenda for the next council meeting, but is that the authorization to approve legislation, or that didn't happen? Because
the motion to prepare legislation for the ash tree removal and treatment did not happen.
yeah, that's what, okay.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Is it possible for us at that time then to deny the legislation at that point, once we have the figures and the additional data that has been requested this evening in front of us before the next council meeting, so that we can say, no, we're going to not put this on the to-do list for 2020, so that we can save some dollars and appropriate it other ways?
That is correct. So I'm going to ask the city administrator with Rick Brown's assistance to provide minutes from the council meeting and the admin public works meeting that are relevant to this before the next council meeting, so they can do that by email. And then to your question, Councilmember Dodwell, at the next council meeting, the council could make a motion to have legislation prepared or not. It would be the same decision that was presented to the council this evening.
I would just ask that they provide that all in one packet and also attach that to the city council agenda the following week, and make sure that they include the minutes referred from admin public works on what their outcome was.
Absolutely. That's what we're going to do.
Okay.
All right. Seeing nothing further, this will bring to an end our work session. I just want to mention before we bring it to conclusion, just a housekeeping item relative to the next council meeting. The plan at the moment is to have that in person, and we'll be letting everyone know the details of that between now and then. But as I sit here this evening, that is the plan. So with that, we're almost at 7 o'clock. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. We'll take about a 3 to 4 minute break, and then we'll start the main meeting of the council. Someone like to make a motion to adjourn, please? Maybe Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. Non-debatable. All in favor of the motion to adjourn the work session, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so we will adjourn for just a few minutes, and we're already right at about 7, so I would ask that you could please return as quickly as you can. It would be good for the public and those who are going to be watching. Thank you. I'm muted. Well, you're probably still on. Right, good evening. I would like to call to order the meeting of the City Council for the City of Wildwood for Monday, June 8, 2020. Ms. Eldridge, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Bolin,
Here.
Councilmember Stevens,
Here.
Councilmember McCune,
Not hearing any.
Here.
Member Bowe, Councilmember Bowe,
John, we need you to acknowledge that you're here for the meeting. Can you unmute Councilmember Bowe, please? We can't do that.
Councilmember Bowe, can you unmute your audio?
His assistant's gone.
That isn't going to help, John.
John, if you move your cursor to the upper right-hand part of your screen, I think you'll see unmute.
Could be on the lower part of this too.
Or John, if you just hold your space bar down. It'll unmute you temporarily if you do that.
All in.
Yes.
I haven't got.
Okay.
So John, if you could just let us know if you are here, please.
I'm here, yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Here.
Councilmember Remy,
Here.
Councilmember Edens,
Here.
Councilmember Bros,
Here.
Councilmember Garitano,
Present.
Councilmember Worther,
Present.
Councilmember Jordan,
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Here.
Councilmember Farmer,
Here.
Councilmember Dillard,
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Here.
Councilmember Gragnani.
Okay, thank you. And I also, in addition to welcoming all of you and anyone from the public who is joining us this evening, I also want to acknowledge and welcome Trey Trapani, who is a sophomore at Lafayette High School, and he's been shadowing me for the last few weeks. He has an interest in city government from Ward 7. So Trey, welcome. Again, glad to have you with us this evening. For those of you who are comfortably able, if you'd please stand with me for the saying of our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next on the agenda is approval of minutes from the council's May 26, 2020 work session and regular meeting. There are no questions or comments. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Made by Councilmember Farmer. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Brost. Any discussion on the motion to approve the minutes? Seeing no discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Right, motion carries. Moving next to public participation, we do have at least one participant for that this evening, so I'll just mention a couple of things about it. It is a valuable component of our meeting. Anyone who wishes to speak must complete a speaker card and provide it to us. When your name is called, you can approach the podium, state your name and your ward. To ensure all who wish to speak have the opportunity to do so, there is a 5-minute time limitation, and I will let you know when that time limitation is reached. If you have any questions for us, please mention that during your remarks and identify the official you would like to respond. That official will make note of it, and at the conclusion of public participation, any official who chooses to respond will have 3 minutes to do so as to all questions directed to that official. The official may choose to respond to your questions after tonight's meeting, and we may also post any responses on the City Council page of our website. And finally, please be respectful to others in making your remarks. This means that interrupting others and using profane and abusive language are prohibited. And I want to thank everyone for following these in advance. And our first speaker card, our city administrator who's with us this evening, Sam, would you like to please call that speaker forward, please?
Yes, sir. Andy Irvine, 554 Etherton Road, wants to speak about illegal business operation and code ordinance violation.
Mr. Irvine? We've got to get this one, so we got to get him unmuted.
Let me try to make sure you're unmuted.
We want everyone to hear what you have to say.
I think you figured out on there, Sam.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your attention this evening. I just learned from a couple of council members in attendance here that they did not receive the email that was forwarded by the city clerk this morning to all council members. So I will be sending that out again this evening myself, and possibly tomorrow morning for some. And if you receive it more than once, I apologize. Essentially, the email was a forwarding of an email that went out to Mayor Bolin, Sam Anselm, Larry Brost, prosecuting attorney Molly Prost, city attorney John Young, and Joe Vunich on May 15th. And it deals with the continuing illegal business operations at 542 Etherton Road by the Valerio and Elizabeth Hernandez LLC, Lawn Service LLC, and also the as-built status violations of the simplified conditional use permit for the barn that they have put up where they operate the business from. So there's a lot of history in the original email that shows the history of the experience since the formal complaint process has begun with the city, and where we are at now. Now, thanks to Joe Vunich, who has taken it upon himself to make sure that things were done properly, he has gotten it to the point where he has turned over 4 violations for the court to entertain, for the prosecuting attorney to entertain taking to the court. In the past, the prosecuting attorney has shown some reluctance as to whether or not they felt they could actually prosecute this case. It's the admissions of guilt and the evidence is so overwhelming that, that's part of the reason why I sent out the email to all of you today, and with an intro so that you can understand the complexity of this. It also has some photographs, and it has copies of emails that have transpired between code enforcement, planning and zoning, the mayor, the city administrator, and myself. So my time is obviously running out. I'll get this information out to you if you haven't received it. And the point of it is that we need your help in making sure that this situation does get prosecuted as it should be. And there's more than just the 4 violations that Joe just recently sent to the prosecuting attorney to entertain here. They deal mainly with the violations of the as-built status of the barn, but we still have an illegal business that's operating on 7 days a week, round the clock, and vehicles coming and going, loading up. And now apparently the courts won't even be able to hear anything until the end of July or the beginning of August. And it's business as usual next door. So we need your help to, if in whatever ways you've deemed necessary, to communicate with the prosecuting attorney or anyone to get this situation moved in the proper direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speaker cards?
No speaker cards. I'm waiting to see if anybody in the attendee list wishes to address council.
Okay, so we have no further speaker cards. And is there anyone in the attendee list that wishes to address the council at this point? If you do, just do a raise hand. All right, seeing none, that takes us to concludes our public participation. No mayoral announcements or appointments this evening, and we do not have any public hearings. So moving into legislation, Bill 2557 is before the council for final passage, and it concerns Ward 1. Is there a motion for the second reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Brost, seconded by Councilmember Werther. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2557.
Bill 2557, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing a change in the zoning district designation of a 9.34 acre tract of land being the Wildwood Family YMCA from the NU Non-Urban Residence District with an amended conditional use permit, ACUP, to the C8 planned commercial district with it so situated at the southwest corner of State Route 109 and New College Avenue, and having said action consistent with the letter of recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission, which is dated May 4th, 2020, second reading.
Thank you. Joe, do you have anything to add further to the information that's been presented to the council on Bill 2557?
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, I do not have anything to add to the bill as presented. I would note that Tim Peters, the Executive Director of the Wildwood Family YMCA, is an attendee. So if there are specific questions about the facility, I'm sure he could answer them for City Council members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does any member of the council have any question or comment relative to Bill 2557? Seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 2557.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Remy,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano,
Yes.
Councilmember Werther,
Sorry, had to get off mute there. Aye.
Councilmember Jordan,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Dillard,
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens,
Yes.
Councilmember McCune,
Yes.
Councilmember Bope.
Yes.
A bill passes, and Mr. Peters, thank you for being with us this evening relative to that. Moving into first readings, Bill 2558 is before the council and it concerns all wards. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Dodwell. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Farmer. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Sorry about that. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2558.
Bill 2558, an ordinance of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, revising the budget for the fiscal year commencing on January 1st, 2019 and ending on December 31st, 2019, first reading.
Thank you. Mr. Hansen, do you have anything you'd like to mention relative to this bill?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening to you and to council members. Bill 2558 before you this evening amends the fiscal year 2019 budget to reflect an additional expenditure in our road salt line item as we work with the audit for the first quarter of this fiscal year and review the 19 budget. There was this item that we found was a purchase order that was issued in 2020 for salt that was actually used in 2019. So for proper auditing procedures, we are recommending and would request this amendment to the budget for 2019.
Okay, thank you. And Sam, is there any need to have a second reading on this evening?
We would respectfully request a second reading if that's the council's pleasure.
Before we get to that, any discussion on the bill? If there isn't, I would entertain a motion for second reading if any member of the council would like to make that. Made by Councilmember Remy, seconded by Councilmember Bartoni. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, and as you know, motion for second reading on the meeting of the first reading takes a 2/3 vote. I think the 2/3 has been met. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2558.
Bill 2558, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, revising the budget for the fiscal year commencing on January 1st, 2019 and ending on December 31st, 2019, second reading.
Thank you. Any further discussions on Bill 2558? Seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of the bill.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Remy,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Gross,
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano,
Yes.
Councilmember Werther,
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan,
I'm sorry, could you unmute your microphone, Councilmember Jordan?
My apologies, yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Dillard,
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens,
Yes.
Councilmember McCune,
Yes.
Councilmember Boak,
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino.
Yes.
Okay, Bill 2558 passes. Moving next to Bill 2559, it's before the council also for first reading, and it concerns Ward 6. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Jordan. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Farmer. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2559.
Bill 2559, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, hereby authorizing the mayor of the City of Wildwood, Missouri to execute any and all necessary and required documents to accept the donation of an approximately 27-acre site from Ms. Joanna Yost as future park property of the community and for it to be named Portner Park, with said acceptance being undertaken with deep gratitude to her. First reading.
Thank you. Joe, do you have anything further you'd like to mention relative to Bill 2559? I know this was before the council at its last meeting and it approved of preparing the necessary legislation, but do you have anything further to mention relative to the bill?
Just one item, Mr. Mayor, with your permission. Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, this particular item, as the mayor mentioned, was presented 2 weeks ago during. I would note that the bill's been prepared for your concern, consistent with the requirements set forth by Ms. Yost in the trust, as well as the direction received from City Council from the aforementioned work session. I would note that there are a number of steps that have been started regarding due diligence. We hope to have those completed in 2 weeks. Mr. Young and I will address any issues that are found, and if there are issues found, we will advise you in 2 weeks and ask for a delay. But as we move forward, we're hopeful to have this completed sometime either at the end of June or early July. And again, the department's available for any questions or comments, and thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Councilmember McCune.
Joe, I think I asked the question before. I just want to make sure that we're clear that once the environmental study and things of that nature are conducted, that at any point we can still not go into this agreement if we find some issues. I just don't want to I don't want to kick the can too far down the road and we run into one of these major issues that we take on as a liability. So I just want to make sure that the due diligence is complete and we can get out if you do run into a problem.
Yes, ma'am. In section 2 of the bill, it basically says that regardless of an approval of the bill, the city's written acceptance being subject to the satisfaction of title and environmental condition of the property. So we've even put in the text of the bill that if something were to come up, even if the ordinance may be passed, we still have to give written acceptance.
Thank you for clarification. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, ma'am.
Thank you. Any other questions for Joe or any comments on the bill? All right, seeing none, Bill 2559 will be on the agenda for the next council meeting. We have no resolutions this evening. Moving into miscellaneous, we have 2 receipts in file. The first, PZ 2-20, Joe.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, the Planning and Zoning Commission has provided for your consideration a action on its part relative to ground-mounted solar panels on a lot that is located in the Monarch Hill subdivision. The Planning and Zoning Commission did grant the solar panels, but granting of the conditional use permit was premised on a number of conditions. As with any conditional use permit, the City Council has up to 15 days to exercise its power of review of the Planning and Zoning Commission's action. The 15-day period starts with your receipt and filing tonight. And if there are any questions regarding this particular matter, the department would be glad to try to answer them at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Remy.
Mr. Boone, it's just a question, not specific to this solar panel, but solar panels in general, and you can just maybe help me out. In the upcoming years, is there a plan to develop a comprehensive package from P&Z so that perhaps all of these solar panel items can come before us?
And I apologize, Councilmember Remy, right at the end, you broke up a little bit. And I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
Sorry, I'll speak louder. So I just was curious, is there a plan in the upcoming year to reevaluate a more streamlined approach for all the solar panels so that they don't come before, per se, the council anymore, but maybe we have comprehensive ordinances just for solar panels on top of what we currently.
Pardon me. The Planning and Zoning Commission is at this time reviewing the regulations for solar panels. They took a first step a week ago tonight, and I think we'll have something to you probably by the end of June or sometime in July. And we will investigate what you just described in terms of maybe an accelerated process. Thank you.
No, that's great. Sorry, I must have missed that. I apologize. Great work by the PNC group.
One thing I would just add to Councilmember Remy's question and Joe's response is that the only reason these come before the council is because the applicant is seeking to do something different than that which is provided on the city's solar panel, under the solar panel ordinance. So they're looking to get a CUP, which they would need to do something to deviate from that. So just for everyone's information, we do have and have for a few years had that policy on the books, and it's served us pretty well. So just FYI for further background. Any other questions for Joe or, I'm sorry, Councilmember Dodwell, my apology.
That's fine, Mayor, thank you. Joe, I just wanted to send thanks to you and to the P&Z committee for ensuring that the placement of that panel is more towards the center of the property. I know that several years ago we had someone who decided to put up, I think, as large, if not larger, array of solar panels right on the edge of their property line, so that the neighbor would have to be looking at it at all times without any additional tree line or anything around it. And so I want to thank the Planning and Zoning Committee for moving forward on better exploring options on some of these larger properties so that it's not only the neighbor's responsibility of having to see things, but it's also the homeowner's responsibility to do it in a less, in a more friendly manner so that their neighbors will not provide a impetus to deny it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, and I'll pass it on to the commission members. They always like to hear positive feedback.
Okay, thank you. Next, Joe, is the recommendation report relative to site development for an equipment shelter to support bringing fiber to home, high speed in Ward 1. Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, as was related earlier tonight in work session, there's a lot of different efforts underway right now to provide rural internet, high-speed internet service to the rural areas of Wildwood. One such effort is Bays ET, which has been a wireless provider for the rural areas of Wildwood since 2014. The owner of Bays ET has made a decision that wireless service is not the solution for the Wildwood areas that are considered rural, and has been testing fiber to the home. One location that has been asking for solutions for a long period of time is the Rieger Road area of Ward 1. Mr. Bay has a plan to extend fiber from Route 100 along Wild Horse Creek Road to Rieger Road to the Shiloh and Homestead Estates subdivisions. Critical to that need is a location for the backhaul, the source of the fiber signal, so to speak, the internet signal. And this particular parcel of ground is owned by the city of Wildwood. We have an internet pole on it at this time, and Mr. Bay would like to add an equipment shelter, which is approximately 160 square feet in size. The Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed the site development plan and did support the location, believing that it will not impact the nearest resident to the southwest and will provide a needed service to areas that now lack high-speed internet access. How does this play with the RFP and other efforts? Certainly there is some crossover, but not knowing the outcome of the RFP and knowing the need of the residents in the Homestead Estates subdivision and the Shiloh subdivision, the feeling is to proceed forward and let the competition and the market determine who ends up providing service and who does not. Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, I'm available for any questions or comments. And as always, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Joe. Any questions or comments for Joe? Councilor McCune?
I'll make it quick. So I'm just coming into this being a year here. Do we, on any other land that we have a tower or a cell tower, do we charge for that land use? And is that a way that we can continue to do so for this property to kind of get some more income for the city?
It's a very good question, Ms. McCune. And yes, on our internet poles, we require the providers to pay a fee to the city on a quarterly basis or 4 times a year. And the fee is based on the number of customers served from the pole. It's not a substantial amount of money, but in the case of the city, our return on investment can be a little longer than a private for-profit company. The use of the city's right-of-way for the fiber, we have at that bridge. We've not charged in other locations, but certainly Mr. Young and I can talk about that tomorrow. And if we have a solution or an answer, we can get it to you in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I would appreciate it. I see that other cities do this at different levels, and I don't know how that was negotiated or how it works in the city. So I'd just like to look at other source income for the use of our land. So thank you for that and that consideration.
And fiber to the home is a new product. Like I say, we've addressed the wireless component, but we'll talk tomorrow at our management team meeting, and I'll hopefully have a better response for you in 2 weeks. Thank you.
And Joe, if I could just ask if you could maybe include that in a work session memo or just email it to the council ahead of time, that would be ideal.
With your permission, Mayor, I'll do both.
Okay, thank you. All right, so those are our 2 items. Councilmember Garetano.
Okay, motion to adjourn, please.
We have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Farmer, non-debatable. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you very much, council members. The motion to adjourn passes, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Good night, all.